Welcome to Happily Ever Aftermath, the podcast that explores the movies that influenced how we view love and romantic relationships. Yes, there will be spoilers. I'm your host, Diana Rojek-Sconard. My heart belongs to Daddy, Marilyn Monroe. We're talking about the movie Little Voice from 1998, and it's Ewan McGregor. So I have to have a very special guest with me. Hi, Meg.
Hi, Diana. Thanks for having me back for yet another wondrous Ewan McGregor.
It's first of all, the weather is beautiful.
It is.
So I'm glad that you're here yet again to talk about this. I don't know. The filmography kind of works, but then going through what he has been in, I'm just like, well, that doesn't work. That's a horror movie of some kind. I guess they kind of... Never mind, it's Shallow Grave. I don't think I could work with that. What else we got? Yeah. And then, for the most part, I was not going to do Attack of the Clones as much as
producer Ryan and myself would have loved to talk about it.
As much as the suggestion came up, I was not about to out anybody, but yes. But thank you for coming on. I picked this movie because it was... one that was part of the whole, being swept up in watching The Phantom Menace many, many, many times. And I'm just like, hey, who is this Ewan McGregor guy? And then just grabbing all these different movies. I'll tell you this much. Little Voice it's not one that people know. And I Googled it, and apparently a TV series is out called Little Voice, and that got confusing really quickly. I'm like, is this based off of the same movie that was also based off of the play? No, they're singing too. So, but when there's Little Voice, I guess that's not too hard of a stretch for
I guess it
singing.
would probably be about singing, yeah.
Or, I'm not even going to get creative. Good for them. So this movie, the cast it's pretty great. So Brenda Blethyn, Jane Horrocks, Michael Caine. Hey, Ewan McGregor, who would have thought? Philip Jackson, Annette Badland, and Jim Broadbent, which he looked a lot greasier than I remember in this movie.
I thought it was funny that Jim Broadbent was in this movie because I saw a lot of parallels between his character here and his character in Moulin Rouge, which we also talked about for a past Ewan McGregor. But Once again, he's the MC introducing the young ingenue and all that jazz.
Well done. It's so funny because I want to say that this was my introduction to Jim Broadbent. So I'm just like, yeah, he's like forever in my brain, Mr. Booze. And then I started watching more things, and he just became Jim Broadbent. So I'd like to congratulate him on breaking out of a character in my brain, at least. So I read the synopsis off of the internet. The Google search failed me, and the IMDb description failed me. So, I mean, for the most part, I'm just going to try to, if you could help me out a little bit, Meg, it's the main character, LV, stands for Little Voice. She is, let's just say she's pretty much traumatized by the death of her father and doesn't exactly have a great relationship with her very, I'm going to say rambunctious mother. And she likes to play classic records that was left to her from her by her father. And she has this amazing talent for mimicking these very talented singers. So Marilyn Monroe, Judy Garland, and the rest, because I'm actually not very good at naming all of these singers. And on one side, you have her mother, who is dating a talent agent played by Michael Caine. And he hears that and he's like, oh, this is my ticket out of here. So it's a classic, this is my ticket to the big time situation. And he's, trying to convince her to get on stage. And the story continues. So
I think that's a good synopsis. I would like to talk about the IMDb synopsis for just a moment because it's crazy.
The floor is yours. Please do.
So this is what they had to say. A shy, reclusive lady is convinced by an invisible entity to sing. Subsequently, she finds herself noticed by a sleazy talent agent and her talent being showcased on stage. She also meets a kind but nervous man who becomes her best friend. So I just loved that this invisible entity, this is her memory of her father, essentially. But if you were reading this synopsis, you might think that it was a literal ghost or perhaps even an alien. And I think even saying that Ewan McGregor's character becomes her best friend, that's a little bit of a stretch even, I would say.
So a lot of the times these particular synopsises aren't quite right, and then I just yell about it in real time on the podcast. And thank you for reminding me of my roots, because I just no, bad description, very, very bad description.
It's like the person didn't actually watch the movie. It's like there was a game of telephone and several people told other people what the movie was about, and this is what they ended up with.
A disembodied head appears and encourages her, sing for me. No, it's
like Phantom of the Opera style. Yeah, it was a phantom. It was a phantom like opera person who is telling her to sing.
Yeah, the phantom of her father. And if or maybe somebody watched this but with the sound off, and it's just like, hey, a ghost is making her dance and sing, I guess.
A black and white ghost is speaking to her, and not speaking to her, actually, just staring at her encouragingly from her doorway.
Right. And this is probably a good okay, no, I can't go on until that other part. And he becomes her best friend. Uh-huh. Yeah.
Sure.
I don't want to push the concept of the friend zone, but this synopsis is friend zoning Ewan McGregor. So, yes. Seeing this movie, I should probably put it in the context of, again, I mentioned that I was, being swept up by Star Wars fever, and Ewan McGregor was hitting it big as Obi-Wan Kenobi. And again, this one, I actually managed to, I hope the statute of limitations has passed on this, get a bootleg copy off of eBay. It was actually not a bootleg. It was
Oh, that sounds like an ambulance. That was supposed to be cop sirens coming after you.
Oh my goodness. Allegedly, I was on eBay, and allegedly, I think this was the one that made me laugh so hard. The screeners that you were not allowed to resell, that actually tells you on the VHS cover, and also on the movie itself, the thing at the bottom would say, this movie is not for resale. It is against the law. Not even just the FBI warning thing before of it. And even better, it switched to black and white periodically. so maybe it wasn't a ghost the whole time. Maybe it was just the picture was going out when her father appeared and made her sing. So, but eventually I did get this on DVD, and it was one that I like to put on, because there was nothing wrong with putting this on and then just having the music play through it as I'm doing something else, because what's the purpose of watching it again? I've seen it so many times. Let's hear her sing some more. And it was no, I didn't bother to get the soundtrack in case anyone wanted to know. Although I wonder if I were to look at it, it would be the original artist and not her, and that's not what I was about. So I don't know. Although then again, if Chumbawamba was on that soundtrack, that would have been fantastic. So that's, I watched this movie again, just I had it on in the background a lot. So it was kind of nice. And I'll be perfectly honest. I mean, the reason why this pick kind of works is that Ewan McGregor was the ultimate in shy. And I think it's great that the main character was even shyer than he was. And so it was just really sweet to see the extent of a relationship play out about as far as I did as a teenager, where it's just hi, yeah, and that's it.
I see.
The end. Yeah. But watching it as an adult now, I'm like, I'm asking Meg if she'll watch this with me. Was there anything even there, or did I just did he become her best friend? Or did I just put a romantic relationship on this and didn't even pay attention to what was actually going on? No. I think he liked her. She was just kind of she was busy.
Yeah.
She had some other things going on.
It's a very chaste romance as far as their romance goes.
Thank you for putting it that way. That's a very kind interpretation of it.
It is an R-rated film, on the other hand.
Oh, well, if we want to talk about a different quote-unquote romantic relationship on the screen, well, it was rated R for nudity and probably language. yeah, when that popped up, I'm like, geez, I forgot. Of course I'm not watching this movie. I was listening to this movie. Couldn't remember what the rating was. There was singing involved. That's all I could remember.
So you saw this movie several times before.
It was, I definitely watched it a lot. And then definitely listened to it a lot. So yeah. Yeah, but again, it was teenage mind, me. So some of it is like, I wonder how much of that I could still like recite. A lot of it was very familiar, the beats of it, but I couldn't do it as much as I thought I would. So
Ewan's character, Billy, for you was a very safe romantic character, I guess I would say, since it's a pretty chaste film.
I mean, I think that's probably the safest character he's ever played in a movie before, considering his ordinary I mean, again, see Shallow Grave, people.
Considering his life less ordinary.
Oh, there is a life less ordinary. I mean, he kidnapped no one in this movie, so that's like a good start right there. So yeah, still have not finished Velvet Goldmine, but I can't comment for the rest of that movie. But I mean, if anyone wants to comment on I Love You, Philip Morris, or anything else to that effect. Oh, I mean, in Down with Love, he's a scoundrel, but you know, not really. He's a 1960s. I don't even. What's the not Pillow Talk, but God, what are those movies called? It does not matter. The point is, 1960s movies where just it seems. Yeah, I don't know. Moving on. The point is, if you've got him in this movie and him in Down with Love, that's probably like the tamest versions of a romantic relationship I think you would see with him. So
yeah, probably.
Yeah, unless we picked a movie where he was a bystander, in which case, I mean, he's practically a bystander in this movie. So, but have you seen this movie before?
I had not seen this movie before. I watched it specifically for the podcast, so this was my first experience with it.
Yay, and thank you.
Yes, thanks for having us watch it.
Yeah, so for the most part, I mean, we talked about the relationship itself, but what do you think about the movie overall?
Overall, I liked it. It wasn't exactly what I was expecting. First off, I was a little surprised that it was rated R. I don't know why, but my initial impression from the trailer was a movie more like That Thing You Do, a family-friendly movie, you know, about a young person singing and maybe getting famous. So that's kind of what I had in mind. So I was a little surprised to see actually how dark it was oftentimes.
Right.
Even just looking at Little Voice's home life, it's not a very happy home life. So tonally, it wasn't what I was expecting. But once I recalibrated what the movie was, I enjoyed it. I had some problems with it. It wasn't a perfect movie. And I do think the tone, besides being darker than I anticipated, was also kind of inconsistent because it was really light and frivolous and humorous at times. And then it got incredibly, incredibly dark with, you know, the mother is kind of verbally abusive, emotionally abusive. She even hits her daughter at the end of the movie. Yes. So it gets pretty serious. Right.
It's when I had pitched this and then after I watched it, my first impressions are, you know, the singing, that, you know, the fact that she comes alive on stage, it's so great. Oh shoot, that's right, the parental abuse. Oh no, I'm sorry, Meg, I'm sorry. So you know, content warning for anyone who think that they may want to watch this. It's it does. I agree with you. It got darker, and one of the things that really just kind of like freaked me out a little bit and spoke to me was, so she goes on stage, Michael Caine plays Ray Say, and he convinces her. Another thing about the description that I didn't like, a different one that talked about how she gets caught up in the possibility of fame and fortune. I'm like, no. No. What happened was, smooth talking Ray manages to convince her that, oh, you sing with, for your father. Oh, okay. Well, this could have been like a beautiful tribute, but that's okay. We don't have to do this if you don't want to. And then she gets kind of in her head of just like, oh, we have this connection when I sing. So if I'm doing this on stage, it's an opportunity, so that's what, convinces her to do it. And so when they're celebrating, because it was an amazing show, and they got word out to a big time person, like, I'm not going to say like, it's a like music executive of some kind, and they're just like, awesome, we're going to do this again tomorrow. And you actually just kind of see her go like, it was only supposed to be once. And then smash cut to when they're trying to get her out of bed, she goes limp and she does not move. And I'm like, oh, I know that feeling. I've never actually had people try to drag me out of bed, but I know that being down, and it's just like energy is gone. I'm not doing anything right now. So that was just like incredibly, stark to see that. And on the other side of it, just again, I forgot how abrasive her mother was through all of this, because she's played very well. And in fact, the actress got an Academy Award nomination for that particular role. And like, I'm listening to her berate her daughter, but at the same time, I feel so bad for her. Yes. Because she's so unhappy. And I have a sympathy for women. I mean, I give her credit because she's a widow. She, is trying so hard to just kind of find love, but also some stability. It would appear like, just based off of just the setting, I guess the father/husband had a record shop, and then that seems to be closed, but they're living above it, and she's working, I guess, at some sort of like outdoor market, and you just see her doing it, and I'm just like, she's still doing stuff, and the house is falling apart. Literally, I mean, like, you've got, the electrical wiring is a kind of a plot point where every time they turn something on there, they get a shock. And so she's keeping it together. And when I was younger, it was just like, oh God, this woman is a mess and her daughter deserves better. But now it's just like, no, this is just I'm wondering if there's like a weird codependency between the two of them that I don't think an hour and 37-minute movie really decided to throw in for the sake of my curiosity, which is a good thing.
Yeah, even though the mother character, Mari, does do some pretty reprehensible things to her daughter, she is definitely a sympathetic character. Mm-hmm. And not to excuse her behavior, but she's also dealing with an isolated daughter who is very reclusive, won't even speak to her mother. And the daughter, LV, has deified her dead father. Yep. She only speaks to her dead father. She's made her dad into this saint-like figure almost. And just imagining being in her mother's shoes, that her dead husband is perfect in her daughter's eyes and can do no wrong, whereas she's still the caregiver and still alive, and her daughter won't even, acknowledge her existence, essentially. So that can't be easy for the mother character either.
Right. And there was also some like conversation between the two of them where it was just like, you two were always together, and it was always just the two of them, and she was also there. So even when he was alive, he clearly like doted on his daughter, which happens, but clearly it was at the expense of his wife. And
she does seem to see her daughter as competition, which is definitely not healthy.
No. Lots of things that she does not healthy. There's the drinking to excess. Drinking not bad. Drinking to excess, don't care for that at all. But yeah, I mean, again, not a great character, but I don't cast her as the villain. There's a lot of people who are just like are the villain, but I just see this, this like weird desperation in all of them.
Definitely. And it's a great performance, and it's a very, very funny performance at times. I was half hoping that your quote at the top was going to be, "I've got tits, a gob, and an ass that won't quit." Which is how she describes herself. So.
I briefly considered Make Way for a Woman in Lust.
That's good too.
Yeah. No, she definitely has the lines, and I definitely had to turn the subtitles on for some of it because I'm just like, whoa, she's going so fast. I really need to figure out what she said. Subtitles are only helping about 25% of the time. Awesome.
I also really liked Michael Caine's performance. I think his was probably my favorite performance of the movie, to be honest. You know that meme that's been going around recently that's like 4 pictures of an actor or actress in different roles, and it's like, he understood the assignment or she understood the assignment, you know, and it's supposed to show how they've been transformative across these different roles. Well, I feel like Michael Caine is the embodiment of the he understood the assignment meme, because he never phones it in. No matter the role, he is giving 110%. I hate that phrase. I don't know why I just said that. But he's really giving it his all here. And in the beginning of the movie, I'd say in the first 2/3, he's also very sympathetic. He's very humorous. He's almost sweet in a way. You can see him manipulating LV and saying exactly what he needs to say in order to get her to agree to perform. But at the same time, it's almost like he's also sincerely trying to encourage her. It doesn't ring entirely hollow.
That's something that on rewatch was actually kind of great, is that when I was genuinely paying attention to him convincing her, I'm like, he's not hitting anything that she's not receptive to. I mean, now granted, there's a manipulation aspect to it, but at the same time, he understands her. If he didn't bother to understand what her motivations were, then it would just be like, you know, he would get nowhere, of course. But at the same time, he took the time. He surveyed things, and I'm just like, oh, this is probably why he was very good at what he did when he was younger, and he had more access to, you know, talent. So, you know, he's definitely charismatic in the role while still being like sleazy in a different way.
Yeah.
So, and then one of the things that the reviews had actually commented on about, you had mentioned tone, and it's totally right, because there are things that are more serious than they should be, and then light and frivolous when the performance is happening, and then back to like, oh, this just got really serious really quickly. One of the things that was pointed out is just that all of a sudden, like, he just becomes a raging villain.
Yes.
And it doesn't really seem, I think what happened is that, again, an hour 37 is not enough to show his absolute desperation, because you watch him pawn his life away for this one performance. And my thought on that was like, right, but you did it for the last performance, so how are you getting everyone back for the second performance? I don't fully grasp, but again, I'm not the accountant of this movie, so I'll run with it. But so I can see his desperation, but at the same time, it came too cartoony too quickly.
I would agree with that critique for sure, because he turns very, very mean and cruel almost on a dime. It's kind of a heel turn. And like you said, we do know that he's desperate. He's terribly in debt, and even more so now. But even knowing that, the way that we see the character in the first 2/3 or so of the film, I don't think was enough to justify this complete change in his behavior. Yeah, I didn't like that. I think they could have made him be the antagonist without being the evil villain at the end.
Agreed. And another thing I should probably say, you know, just for the basis of the podcast itself, like, so Ewan McGregor is in this movie.
Oh, yes.
And well, that's a theme, but like the movie itself, it's like, so they're installing a phone in their home, and he comes in and he takes an interest in LV, and you see him just kind of like come back and try to talk to her. And then he does kind of like this other thing where he has, you know, access to the service truck to where he can kind of go up to where the telephone poles are, and he does a very, in general, kind of stalkery, but at the same time, when you're young, it's so cute. It's so cute. Oh my God, he's Romeo and Juliet and her.
I was going to say, is it stalkery or is it Romeo and Juliet?
You say tomato, I say stalkero. So, no, I just wanted to put both of it, because one interpretation could be like, oh, that's so sweet, he's Romeo and Juliet, her, and the other interpretation is just like, dude, back that truck away from her window, please.
Don't put a cherry picker in the girl's window.
So there's that. But it's so funny, because he he talks to her just a little bit. He hears her playing the music. He scares her. And then she does open up the thing and they talk. And he misinterprets so many of the things that she says because she's just talking about her records and he wants to talk about. So he's a pigeon keeper. I don't know how else to describe it. He keeps pigeons. So he'll say things. And part of the joke is like, who's Dwayne? Dwayne is his bird. Get it right. And she'll quote Marilyn Monroe. He's like, oh, like, hence my heart belongs to daddy. Oh, Marilyn Monroe. Oh, yeah. So it's just a cute nervousness between the two of them. But one thing I should note is this movie was adapted for the screen. It's based off of a play called The Rise and Fall of Little Voice. And the romantic arc between her and him, not in the play. Also, the big climactic end that involves the saving of a life, also not in there. Again, the critics have pointed out, yeah, these were unnecessary plot points. And I'm like, I'm sure on the stage show, yes, because you can perform a lot of the songs and that's what people are coming for. In a movie, you kind of need something to drive the plot along. Otherwise, it's just like a videotape of a play. So I see where they were coming from, but at the same time, if it didn't have it, I'm not sure how I'd feel about the movie as a whole.
I didn't particularly like the house fire at the end.
Yep.
Which was what you were just referencing, where Billy, Ewan McGregor's character, saves LV. I do understand that they wanted something a little bit more cinematic than a stage performance, but the real emotional climax of the film is her doing her performance for her father. So it really made the most sense to me, narratively speaking, to have that be the actual climax of the film. So it makes the ending bit seem kind of unnecessary and a little bit tacked on and a little bit anticlimactic, even though there is, a raging fire that they have to escape from. It just felt like the movie had ended by that point already. We'd seen her perform. We'd seen her build up to this obstacle, essentially, that she had to overcome. She, at some level, wanted to do this performance for her father, and it was so difficult for her because she's so painfully shy. And then it was like, oh, and by the way, a fire.
We gotta do something to make something happen because we just had this amazing performance and we need more movie. Quick, think of something. So yeah, it's, creating a different type of conflict. And the other conflict was she wasn't going on stage. But if you're gonna end the movie with, and she didn't go on stage, the end.
Right.
Yeah. So if I may ask you this question, because of the whole telephone installation, and the way the characters were. One, what time frame do you think this movie is happening? And two, how old do you think LV and Billy are supposed to be?
Yes, these are important questions. I especially thought about the age question. The time period, also a good question. I think maybe less relevant to me to what I thought about the film. I will say, however, that I knew the film came out in 1998, and I assumed that it was therefore set in 1998.
Right.
But then, like you said, the phone, the technology, it seemed earlier to me, especially since we have this ostensibly young woman who is interested in quite old singers or singers not of her time. I suppose that could happen to anyone of any generation, but it seemed more believable to me if she were in a slightly earlier decade than the 90s. But then we get Chumbawamba.
Correct.
Performed within the movie itself. And I was like, whoa, what year is this?
I mean, are they doing like a Marie Antoinette thing where technically it's this time frame, but the music is here and it's now, so don't get confused.
Yeah, it was Bridgerton vibes.
Oh, right. Yeah, that'd do it. So, yep, that'll do it.
I don't know. When do you think it was supposed to be set?
Well, again, I kept being thrown into it and then taken out of it. And you have LV who has the records, and it's, of course, if that was her now, like in 2000, the 2020s, I'll say, that's just called retro. Or,
right.
I'm sorry. Actually, I don't even know if it's called retro now. Are the kids calling it something
Vintage.
different? Vintage. Thank you. Oh,
maybe.
God. Yeah. So, I think it is supposed to be 1998 with kind of an underline of they're not bothering with like technology the same way. So, around the same time, because you've got a cell phone from one of the technicians to test it. So they're there. And that flip phone really felt like the one that my mom had when she first got it when I was in high school. So I'm thinking that it's there. It's just not really leaning on what technology is there. And then she is behind the times, or she's just like, well, she only wanted a telephone so she could call Ray. So she's like, ugh, yeah. So she's probably just not interested in these types of things unless it, matters to her directly. So that's I just wanted to get a second opinion on that. I'm like, I see the technology and I heard the Chumbawamba, but it's just like, is it possible that it's further back and I just wasn't paying attention?
Do you know when the play was written? Do you know when the play was performed? Maybe that's when it's supposed to take place.
Oh, that makes really good sense. I will look that up, while I would like to hear your thoughts on their age.
Yeah, so the age was an interesting question to me, because we have the character of LV who is quite childish. She has a little girl's bedroom. It's pink, it's frilly. She spends about 2/3 of her scenes in a nightgown, and I would say, once again, a little girl's nightgown. It's got lace, it's got cartoon animals on it. And I was thinking, this is a girl maybe in her late teens who is maybe still kind of in this state of sort of arrested development in a way because of the trauma of her father's death. So I thought that at first, and I could almost convince my brain that this was a young woman, but the actress at the time of filming is in her early to mid 30s. I believe she was 34. And sometimes in the movie, yeah, she looks 34. And the best way that I could square this in my mind was that she's supposed to be a younger woman, because, and by younger, I mean much younger, like 20, 19, maybe even 18. And I think I have to go with that interpretation, because if we're to believe that she's a 30-year-old woman who is still acting like a little girl, I have to think that, well, then the way that everyone treats her just becomes even more predatory in a way, kind of, because I feel like, well, maybe this woman needs some sort of care or something. I'm not sure. But if I assume that she's an 18, 19-year-old girl, then that makes it more palatable, I guess. Not that anyone should be manipulating young women. But anyway, and Ewan McGregor, I assume that his character is maybe a couple years older than she is, early 20s. Although, in fact, he is younger than the actress. So,
okay. No, that feels about right. And with everything that you described, I'm kind of right there with you. Not to bring it back to Bridgerton again, but I do believe the 15-year-old was played by a woman in her 30s. So it's very 90210-esque casting. So it totally makes sense. But the show premiered in 1992.
Oh, okay.
So I can see the vibes of that really kind of coming through. It's just like, oh, sure, and then throw a cell phone in there because it's kind of now, but doesn't have to be. Yeah. I mean, I agree with you in that she's past school, although I wouldn't think that her mom would have been very strict about keeping her in school. Yes, I mean, I can see her just being like, if you could work and make it so I don't have to, that'd be great. But she's not forcing her to, so that's something at least. But I put her in early 20s just for the sake of that state of arrested development, being past like, having to go with your education, but a little bit older for the sake of just like, whatever Billy is doing. I mean, if he's an apprentice or something like that, he's probably in his early 20s as well. So I'm putting them in like a respectable, in my head, in my late 30s age range for the sake of the narrative. But, you know, if I were younger, I'd just be like, oh, sure, they're like 30.
Yeah, I'd say early 20s sounds about right to me.
Sure. Yeah, that totally makes sense. And if you've seen the movie, you can kind of feel it too, where it's just like, how old are you both?
Right.
I mean, okay, I guess. So, alrighty.
What did you think of LV? What did you think of Jane Horrocks' performance?
It was very good. I believe the play was written for her, and her vocal talent. So I think she did a fantastic job. The character itself is really difficult because it's just doesn't say much. It's very a very physical role because she has to react and just kind of be shy, and I want to say, oh, that's not a heavy lift, but it's actually, I would imagine, even harder lift for some if you're trying to convey a whole thing with, well, barely saying anything. I'm imagining her right now when the phone is ringing and she's reaching to answer it, but you can tell she's struggling to do it because she's just, I don't want to answer this phone, but she's actually physically doing it, you know, back when, you know, the phone is just blasting at you when it's a landline. So I'm thinking about that now, and I thought, I don't know, but there's a lot of choices that she had to make, and I think she did a good job overall. Singing was great, although when I revisited it, it occurred to me that it doesn't seem as special now as it was back then, because you have tons of people with various types of vocal talent or multifaceted talent on YouTube, barely recognized. And so it's just like, oh, I bet you I could Google somebody with like 5,000 subscribers who could do this right now too, and then find another one and find another one, and it's just it's an interesting talent. And I'm thinking of the show in Las Vegas where I think there was somebody who was supposed to be the voice of 100 singers, and I'm just like, oh god, 100. They go from Shania to Celine to Whitney, and I'm like, how is that even possible?
You know, that's another thing that I thought about when watching this movie, and I don't know if I ever entirely buy the premise that she was going to be this ticket to fame and stardom for exactly the reasons you said. Especially nowadays with YouTube, with TikTok, we get exposed to a lot of people who have a lot of talent. And I would say it takes more than being able to do a passable impression of someone to become famous. And Judy Garland wasn't famous because she imitated other people. She was famous because she was one of a kind. And I think it's maybe a little unfair to make a performer like Jane Horrocks have to be compared to Judy Garland consistently, because it's like, well, who is ever going to match Judy Garland or Marilyn Monroe or Shirley Bassey, right? It seems a little bit unfair to always invite that comparison. But that being said, I did enjoy her musical performance, and I really should have just paused the movie to look up whether she was singing her own songs or not, because I didn't know. So the whole movie I was sort of preoccupied with thinking about whether I should be impressed or not. And then at the very end of the movie it says Jane Horrocks performed all of her own songs.
Yep. Yes, she did. And again, 1998, very impressive. 2001, I guess it was moderately impressive in 2001 too.
We're 20 years ahead of that now, Diana.
What? Really? Ah, jeez. Not so impressive. I do appreciate her talent. I just, even thinking about it, back then, I'm just like, why isn't she more famous? And I'm just like, oh, well, because you're right, Meg. It takes more than just being able to imitate.
Yeah. Were you familiar with her from the show Absolutely Fabulous?
Not beforehand, but I read about it afterwards. I'm just like, oh, apparently she's on Absolutely Fabulous. I've heard of that show.
I also am not familiar with that show. I haven't watched it. I have some friends who love it and would recommend it if they were here. But no, I can't speak to her performance in Absolutely Fabulous either.
Right. Right. Or I don't even know if that's her real voice, the way she was talking throughout this whole movie.
Also, for a good portion of the movie, I thought that she was Shirley Henderson because I believe that they have very similar voices. So Shirley Henderson does also a lot of voice acting like Jane Horrocks does, but what I best know her as is Moaning Myrtle in the Harry Potter series.
Oh, okay. It's so funny because you said Shirley Henderson, and I'm just like, why am I thinking of the mom from the Partridge Family? No, but yeah. Whereas Moaning Myrtle and also from Bridget Jones's Diary.
Yes,
all three of those movies too. That's yeah.
She's in a Doctor Who episode. She's in a lot of British stuff.
She's in some of that stuff where you might recognize her. Again, she was like in her 30s when she played like a high school student at Hogwarts. So.
Yeah, I'm like, wait, I'm supposed to believe that Moaning Myrtle is 12? Okay.
Maybe you should just focus on her voice.
But yeah, I believe those two actresses have somewhat similar but distinctive voices. That was something else I had to look up. I'm like, is this the woman I think she is? No, she's not.
Yeah. So in a, regular format of the episode, I would ask, when did they fall in love? But I think a more on point question is, hey, Meg, when did they make eye contact with one another?
Right. So I was trying to figure out for my notes how many times they actually exchanged words because I believe there's 2 scenes where they're in the scene together, but they don't actually speak to each other.
Yep.
And I believe they first speak when he sees her outside her balcony when he's on the cherry picker and he comments on her singing. And I have to say that scene was quite a relief for me because also at that point I wasn't even sure whether LV was ever going to speak to someone really. Right. So it was quite refreshing to have them have an actual conversation. So there's that moment. He saves her from the fire and then they speak at the amphitheater. They speak in the pigeon hutch at the end. I believe there's maybe one more scene where they actually speak to each other.
If there is, I can't remember it, so that does.
It might just be those 3 scenes.
I think you're right. I think you're right. And the amphitheater scene, I didn't pay much attention to when I was younger. So when I listened to it, I'm just like, oh, that's the closest he's going to be to saying that he likes you. Casually commenting that there may be people besides your dad who think highly of you.
Yeah. So, yeah, if we're going to talk about romance or love when it comes to these two, I do think that Billy has a little bit of a puppy love infatuation. I would never, ever describe it as true love, quote unquote, because as we've just said, they hardly even know each other. And from LV's perspective, I don't think she feels any romantic feelings for him whatsoever.
I agree.
I don't think that's even on her radar. I don't think that's something she really thinks about. I think as a character, maybe she just hasn't had any romantic experience at all. And I think it's something that maybe is not a high priority for her. So yeah, I don't think she has any romantic entanglement with Billy.
So I think that LV is allowed to have any type of romantic inklings that she wants, but that's an unfortunate waste of a Ewan McGregor.
Yeah, it was a waste of Ewan McGregor, and it was a waste of his singing talents. I don't know. Whenever he's in a movie when other people are singing, I feel like he needs to be given the opportunity to sing as well.
I mean, I wouldn't have had much to speak about it, but damn it, he does sing in A Life Less Ordinary. It's all
he
coming
sure
together.
Does, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. No, I agree with you where it's just like he's not like enamored with her, and I tread very, very carefully when I use this expression, he's a nice guy, because he definitely is looking out for her. He wanted to go see her. He took his boss's very gross advice of how to return to a house when you know a woman, like the husband's out or something, and clearly she's looking for someone to sleep with. And I'm just like, okay, I don't really remember this, but it is kind of coming back to me. And he basically he uses any excuse he can to talk to her. And it's very chaste, as you mentioned before, cherry picker thing aside. He definitely has like this, nurturing side, which oh god, he's doing all the tropes. He's a nice guy. You watch him take care of this animal. All of the signs are there.
Oh yeah, speaking of comparing LV to birds, actually I'm going to put a pin in that for a second, but I would like to return to that. But no, what you were saying about him being a nice guy, he is the only person in this film who actually has LV's best interests at heart. He's not trying to manipulate her. He only wants what's best for her. And even though he doesn't know her very well or at all, he tries to convince her not to do the show because he knows that she's being forced into it, essentially. So It was nice to have one person looking out for her.
Right. And I think he just happens to have a little bit more experience with having people just kind of walk on you for being a little bit off. Like his boss is just like, why don't you say anything? And why are you, so awkward? Are you really still talking about your birds? He's just like, hey, I like what I like and that's okay. And he's seeing her get stomped on in the same way. So, So, for all I know, again, is there a romance and I just missed it? Maybe he's just going to, oh my God, maybe he's just going to be like her. Is he going to train her in the ways of the Force?
Yeah, it's one of those things where it's like, I see the romantic potential, maybe, but I would have to buy into the premise that I could see LV being romantically involved with anyone, which I don't know if I do buy into that premise, but let's assume that maybe they could get together. I do like that they're kind of the same person. They're both very shy, very soft-spoken. I feel like this would be a good match in the sense that they would both have a sort of innate understanding of the other's personality. But on the other hand, at one point, Ray says that LV is someone who needs pushing. And I don't know if I agree with that necessarily, and certainly not in the way that he meant it, but I think there is maybe something to be said for, partners needing to help their loved one explore outside their comfort zone sometimes, or encourage them to maybe take risks sometimes. I don't necessarily subscribe to the idea that opposites attract, which is something that Hollywood seems to love. So I do actually think that this is maybe a more believable couple than a lot of other fictional couples we've seen. But it's also like, I don't know, would they ever challenge one another in a good way? And I don't know if they would.
I agree with you. It's again, it's hard to actually see. Again, she has no inkling towards him. Yeah. It's in the best case scenario, it's just like, hey, thanks for getting me out of the burning building.
Yeah, thanks for saving me from the raging fire, I guess.
Yeah, and also your birds are neat. Tell me more about this whole being on your own thing, at best.
Right.
Yeah, but and we can talk about that, but I want to know what you would just put a pin in for a minute.
Oh, the bird thing. So
take the bird out, or take the pin out.
There are lots of themes and metaphors and similes about birds throughout this movie. So we have Billy's homing pigeons, and when he's speaking about them, when he's explaining them to LV, it's essentially a take on that phrase, if you love something, set it free. So he says, I let the birds out to exercise and fly, and they'll come back. And Ray also tells a story to LV about this little blue bird that was sheltered and protected, but eventually the bluebird grew brave and it sang. And so I think it's pretty clear in here that we're using bird metaphors for LV herself, and her freedom is in her singing and in her independence that she eventually finds. When she does the show, when she does the performance, what's on the stage? Why, it's a giant bird cage that she steps out of to sing her song. And the very last scene is her releasing one of Billy's pigeons to fly free, fly, little birdie. So it's kind of a visual representation at the end of LV finally finding her freedom. Taking wing.
That's some really good metaphor. Do you think that's the case in their actual future?
Are we going to talk about what we think happens after the movie? Okay.
Yes.
I'm sorry, I ruined your segue just to clarify.
No. It's like, no, Meg, that's not what I meant.
So one thing that I did really like about this movie, and I think was sort of necessary if we're having the darker tone, is that LV finally stands up to her mother and expresses why she's been so reclusive. Like, her mom never lets her get a word in edgewise. She never listens to her. And it was a moment of catharsis that I think LV really needed. And as such, I don't think she will return to her mother. I think that she maybe didn't make a clean break there, but I do think that she did what she had to do to break away from her mother. But like you were saying, it doesn't seem that she has a job at all. She's pretty much a shut-in, but she is an adult. So I think it will be difficult for her to suddenly find herself in this independent lifestyle where she had never had to do that before. But I think she is suited to the small town life. I think Billy is as well. I don't think she would immediately, she needs to do baby steps. Her whole life has been a certain way, and now she's thrust into this new situation. So I think although she might move eventually, I think the baby step would just be for her to find a small flat for herself in her same hometown, find a job that suits her personality. And maybe this is a little too on the nose, but I was trying to imagine what the perfect job for her would be. And the best I could think of was a library. It's secluded, it's quiet. She wouldn't have to talk to anyone. So I think that she maybe finds a job at a local library, and she likes it because she gets to still be pretty solitary, not really talk to people. She doesn't make very much money, but she doesn't want very much money. She just needs enough for rent. And I think she continues to work the library for years and years, and she slowly builds up the library's musical collection. That's kind of her pet project. And in the meantime, she's also rebuilding her own record collection that was destroyed in the fire. So she saves money just enough to get herself another record. And I think that that's a pretty happy existence for her. And all this time, I also think that Billy is pretty happy with his lot in life. These are two characters in this movie that don't seem to care for fame and fortune. It's not what they're seeking, unlike everyone else. So I think that Billy is going to be happy enough at his phone repair job. Maybe he takes over from his business partner. Maybe he gets some apprentices of his own to show how to install phone lines. And I think that he'll continue to have his homing pigeons. And I do see them being friends. I think that they could be sort of the one person that the other leans on in this small town. They're still kind of outsiders. No one else really understands them or what makes them tick. But I can see them being friends, going to that amphitheater to listen to concerts together, maybe going to a movie or a musical together. So that's how I envision the next maybe couple decades of their lives.
No, that really makes sense. I went down the unfortunate route of just Mary doesn't seem like the kind of person who would have insurance, let alone, anything like that. So everything that was lost in the fire, I mean, it's just oh, you get insurance. And it's I don't think she has insurance. I don't know what that particular building, they can't move back into it. And I'm just I don't know what that really means. And I really do think of as much as you see, Mary being that way towards LV stays. And I think that there is a codependency between the two of them because, Mary's the one who works and LV does some things, but she does the things for herself. When she's just can you make me breakfast? And nothing there's no response from LV whatsoever. So it's back and forth. So I mean, the only thing that I think would kind of make the most sense is at the end of the movie, there was Mary's friend. Oh God, I can't remember what her name was, but she didn't speak much either. And Mary just really like verbally attacks her, and she leaves in tears. When LV collapses on the stage, she's the one that runs up to her and takes her. So I think what's going to happen is that LV is she's going to move in. I think her name's Sadie.
That sounds right. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah. And she's just an across the way neighbor. So I think LV is going to move in with Sadie, and Sadie's going to be like a surrogate mother to her for a while. Because I think Mary's going to disappear for a while. She's going to just kind of go off to God knows where, because, you know, she doesn't want her job. She lost her one chance at fame, leeching through her daughter. That was never going to happen anyways, and Ray just was so horrible towards her. So, you know, I think she's going to run off. I think LV is going to move in with Sadie, and I think Billy will be there in the friend capacity as well. Like they'll spend time together. They'll be a positive influence on each other, but doing that, and to give this kind of like a nice solid foundation, I think something's going to happen to where LV was the one who knew where like some of like the paperwork was, but not like all of it. And I think while Mary's gone, somebody's going to take interest in that corner, and it's going to be like, we want this to rebuild as something. It'll probably be condos, and that sounds horrible, but that's where all this stuff. And it's kind of a small town, but they want to build there for some reason. And from there, she's going to get like a nest egg. She's going to take care of Sadie. She's going to take care of herself. And then she'll get that quiet existence. I think in the beginning, wherever Mary was working, LV's going to try her best to work there as well, because Sadie is going to encourage her. So she's going to be part of that market thing, whatever that was in the background. I remember fish being involved.
There were fish.
There were fish involved. Fish market background, warehousing of things. So she'll get there. Her and Billy will do that. That will be a cushion to just kind of make them live comfortably, so she can have kind of find that library-esque job. I want to say record store, but
well,
maybe...
I was going to say record store too, but the small town had a record store and it was theirs, and then it burned down. So I don't know if there would be another one.
Exactly. So bookstore? You said library, I say
good.
Bookstore.
Yeah.
Something to that effect. Something where it'll make sense in that quiet little town.
No, I do like that. I do think in my scenario, it would still be a pretty big leap for LV to be totally independent all of a sudden. So it makes sense that she would have a surrogate mother figure. And as you said, the Sadie character was pretty similar to LV in some ways. It's quiet, doesn't say very much, kind. So I think that makes sense.
Sure. Yeah. Again, there's only like 6 people to work with in this movie, and I don't think that she'll be like joining that boy band Take Fat.
No Chumbawamba cover songs for her. Only the classics.
Indeed. All right. Anything else you wanted to add about their future or the movie?
I feel like I should say something else about Ewan McGregor just because it is Ewan McGregor, but I don't know what to say. He was very young in this movie. He's one of those actors that I think looks a little bit more handsome the older he gets. Maybe that's just me getting older as well, but he was charming as always in this movie. Very sweet. I think that his hairstyle was maybe a little tragic, but besides that, it was an okay role.
It's so funny that you say that. I'm just like, well, at least this is one of his good hair movies.
Oh, really?
Okay. I'm sorry, but I did not like the long hair in Attack of the Clones. I don't like the hairstyle he had when he was in Emma. I'm not a fan of when it's like past the ears. So I was okay with it. I'm not saying that I loved it, but I'm saying I was okay with it.
I would have been a lot more okay with it if they just hadn't put so much product in it.
Well, I'm just glad he didn't have the little ponytail in the back. I didn't care about that one either.
No little Padawan side braid rat tail thing.
Yeah, I mean, I'll go back to his hair from Down with Love.
Okay, what's our favorite Ewan McGregor hair?
I think it is Down with Love.
Down with Love, okay.
I'm just going off the top of my head, though.
Yeah, I guess off the top of my head, I would have to say Moulin Rouge, just because that's probably my favorite role of his. Although it was very dark. I think it was dyed, maybe.
That feels about right. But then again, that movie was like very bright in other places, so maybe it was just an optical illusion of his hair.
Yeah, maybe.
Mm-hmm. Well, we should research this and report back. Very important. The many hair styles of Ewan McGregor, a podcast. Thank you, Meg.
Thanks for having me.
This was a great discussion about a very, very subdued performance.
Yes, very quiet performance, literally.
Yep. So so next year we can do like a whole commentary on his like 4-second cameo in A Million Days to Die in the West or whatever that Seth MacFarlane movie was.
Yeah, definitely.
Awesome. Okay. Well, we'd like to know what you think as well. I'm still on my social media hiatus, but you can always reach me at contact@hemcast.com. Meg, where can people find you?
I host a couple of my own podcasts. So I am a co-host on Pod Appetit, where we talk about all kinds of food shows in bite-sized seasons. So we've talked about The Great British Bake Off, Bon Appetit, Stump Sola, all kinds of things. I also co-host Indoorswoman, which is a pop culture podcast with a positive spin. If you want to find those or whatever else I'm up to, you can find me on Twitter at Meg Writes Words, or if you want to be super official about it, I do have my own website, megmezeski.com. That's Mezeske. That's how you spell my weird last name.
Thanks, Meg. All right. So until next time, may your aftermath be happy.